Why, hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. How is everyone doing today? Hello there, Spacey. Nice to see you. Hello there, Mega. Hello there, Softermints. Good to have people here. All right, so today's stream, again, this is a sponsored stream, so we need to make sure that we say that so people understand. It's not Playdab. Oh, crikey. That's a good start, right? Playfab. Yeah, there we go. You got a link to more information there. You can find out more about the Microsoft Game Stack. But yeah, yesterday we set up a login system so that you can log into Playfab using an email and a password and providing a username too. And we went over that flow of setting up a form in Unreal Engine to do so. And then we went through sign up where you can register. We went through signing in where you use an existing account, and we went through retrieving your password and getting an email sent to you so that you can log in if you forgot your password. So we went through that yesterday. Now, the aim of this was building up towards starting to use the kind of data that you can store against users on Playfab. And one use of it would be to create a leaderboard. We're still going to try and work towards that today, but there was a slight little hiccup in the plan. And I can demonstrate what the hiccup was. So recently, it's been changed on, if I go to this page here. So we got two different games. This one was made a while ago. This was made around a month or so ago when I was learning this stuff originally, right? So if we go into this game, you notice when we go into automation, and I pointed this out yesterday, some of you might remember that I said, oh, where is this cloud script thing? I can't remember where it is because it all looked a bit different, and I wasn't going crazy. It actually is different. So this is something that's been changed recently. The way I learned this originally, where you did cloud script kind of server-side code within your browser on Playfab, that was the older way that was being kind of phased out. And they're now moved over to Azure Functions, which I'm sure work perfectly well, but it's not something I'm familiar with. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to explore that in today's video, but maybe in a future video, I can try and learn how it works and we can get into it then. But what we're going to do today is still learn a bit about what you need to know to set up a leaderboard. And we're going to do some client authoritative leaderboard work. We're going to figure out how to do that, which isn't like the safest way to do it, but it gets the key ideas across at least. So we're going to try and figure out how to do that today. Unlike yesterday, we're not going to do it all like this is how you do it. We're going to figure it out as we go along this. We're going to try and use some of the documentation. We're going to Google search, I'm sure. We're going to try and figure things out and just use the API that we got via the Unreal Marketplace. We can use that Playfab API, or SDK it was called, sorry, in order to communicate with Playfab and get what we need to get done. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Keelblock, it's nice to have you here, by the way. Don't worry about, yeah, the VOD will still be there as well. I'll probably put it up on the YouTube as well if that makes it more watchable, if you missed yesterday. But we're going to be carrying on from that bit. But yeah, so what I was starting to show you here, I was just talking about how there's a difference between how they've done the Playfab cloud stuff. So if I go in and I look in the automation tab here, you can see that I've got this revisions tab. And in here, this is how it used to be. You could write functions in here. So you write functions in here, and then you, from the API, you just send a request and say, hey, server, can you run this function? And you give it the name of the function, and it would run it. And then this code can do stuff like find a player of this ID, update their statistics to do this. You can do various things on the server then. So that's how I learned it a couple of months ago when I was looking at this. But unfortunately, if I show you a new project, so if we go back to the one I made yesterday, I say unfortunately, the new system's probably a lot more robust, don't get me wrong. It's not a bad thing, it's just a bad thing for the stream because I was hoping to go through it how I'd done it before. So if we then go into the, automation in here, what we find is we just have functions now. So with older projects, if you've started it, using the kind of cloud scripting in browser, they keep it there for your project, which is great. So it still supports people who did it that way. However, if not, if you've made a new project after, I think it was some point in November, you will only have access to functions now. And the way this would work is you'd register a function, you give it a name, and these functions are hosted online. I think that's the general gist I've got of how these Azure functions work. Is you can basically push code up to a server, and then you have a URL to kind of access that code by. And it's really cool in that way, because it means that you can actually say you had AI, some target selecting algorithm. You could potentially, or maybe not target, that's a bit too dynamic, but let's say like a move, like what if it was a board game, right? And the AI is going to follow some strategy. Now you can have that strategy defined in a server-based bit of logic, right? And what's nice about that is you can dynamically then change that function, and your client code doesn't need to change. Your AI still says, hey, Playfab, what's my next move? And Playfab sends the AI, oh, you should move here. But on this Azure function now, you can then just go and change that function so that it does something different. And then when your AI is playing, it's going to do something different. It's real time in a sense, you know? And so you can definitely see the kind of benefits to this cloud-based kind of handling of things. But yeah, we're not going to go through the Azure functions today, because I need to learn that separately. It's not something I can learn on the fly, I don't think. But we are going to do our best to get started with the leaderboard, as I said. So let's get started with that. So one thing I'm going to do today, if we just recall where we got to yesterday, I could log in. I could go into already signed up. I could type in my email address. I could put in my password. And then I could log in, and then it took us to this level. Okay, so we've learned that much. So what I'm going to do is, because we're going to be going through that process a few times today, I don't want to be typing in my password and username every time. So we're just going to make some tweaks to make this a little easier. So first thing we're going to do, I'm going to move my login widget to be the first one, just so we start on that one. Second thing, I want to be able to just fill some text into the email and password as well. So we're going to go ahead and just make that possible. Now, if you remember, we can't really change the values here, right? Before we had to do it within this type of widget, this generic input widget we made before. So we're going to do the same sort of thing. We've done it so we can set the text on this. We've done the hint text on that. We're just going to make a variable that lets us set the actual text in here. So I can go ahead and type in my username and password, so we don't have to do it every time. So let's go into here. It's going to be super quick. We're just going to get our input field. We're going to call something called set text. And then we're going to, just like before, we're going to promote this to a variable. And this variable is going to be called our pre-filled text. Let's call it that. So I'll compile that now. And what that should allow me to do is, just for testing purposes, I can go ahead and just fill out, oh, let me just expose that out as well. My mistake. Where were we? Login widget. No, generic field ID, this one. I didn't expose it out, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so now what we should have is we have the ability in our login widget to click on these and set some pre-filled text in here. So I can go ahead and put in my email address in here, like so. And then I can go ahead and put my password in here as well. So let me just go and chuck in the password. Great. Okay, so that should be saved now. So what that means is when we press play, I can just press login straight away, and it makes it a bit quicker. That is going to hopefully improve our workflow a little bit as a first point. Second thing, this level, I need to give control back to the player. If you remember what we did on that first level, let's go into the level blueprint for it. So if we go into blueprints, open level blueprint, we did a thing here where we set UI mode and we did show cursor, right? So I'm going to just do this, but we want to do this in the second level that we made. So we made a level called post Playfab login. So let's go ahead into this. We'll go into the level blueprint of this level. And within begin play, we're going to do a similar thing. But this time, Let's get player controller, like so. This time we're going to go ahead and, oh, we don't want to set UI, sorry, we want to do this a bit differently. It's going to be set input mode to game only this time. There we go. And then we want to no longer show the mouse cursor as well. So this should allow us, hopefully, to be able to have control once we've logged in. So let's have a go and see if that works. Let's go to our Playfab login level, press play, log in, and voila, we can move around now at least. So we're not locked in place. So yeah, if you're following on from yesterday's stream, then that is going to be something to set up just to make this go a bit faster. Bizarrio in chat, thank you very much for the subscription. 12 months. You've been in our community as a subscriber for a whole year now. Thank you very much, Bizarrio. Appreciate it. And I hope you're doing well. Okay, so we're going to start then by thinking a little bit about what we want to be achieving. Yesterday, just to give a bit of a recap where we are in terms of Playfab is concerned, is we got to a point where we can now have players who can create an account, and then we can have a list of players. There's only one at the moment, which is sad, but life goes on. It's okay. So if I click onto this, this player, I think hopefully, yeah, we can see that we've got information about the player in here then. Now, this is where we need to talk about that you can store data on your Playfab title, which is your game, and you can store it on your players. And there's two types of things you can store on your players. You can do something called player data, and you can do player statistics. And we're going to have a look a little bit at what those are now. Hello there, Jam Hats, as well. Nice to see you in chat, good sir. Only one player? Yeah, don't worry about it. I'm fine to be. At least I'm number one, right? No one's ahead of me. Okay, so let's have a little chat about the different types of data that we've got then, shall we? So first off, title data. So title data is data that's associated with your game. And this is super cool. This, again, will give you the ability of once you've released a game. So imagine you're in a game jam, you've finished and submitted your game. You can then change data in that game while it's running. So if you've got some variables that control logic, let's say per wave of enemies, it's a first-person shooter where you need to kill all the enemies coming at you. Say that number of enemies that spawn is a variable. Now you could make that a title data, a piece of title data saying how many enemies should spawn. And what that means is when you are in your Unreal project, you will go and ask Unreal, right, go and get how many enemies I should be spawning in this game. And then you use that logic. The cool thing then is I could log into Playfab if I'm realizing people are saying on the game page of my game jam entry, they're like, oh, it's really difficult. I couldn't get past the first level. Maybe I can go and say, right, let's make it 5 enemies it spawns instead of 10. And that way you don't need to push a new build out. People can still play it. You can fine tune things as it goes on. You can imagine this as you could do it as a timer. If it's an escape room, how much time do you have to leave? And you realize no one was finishing. Let's say you're using telemetry data through Playfab in order to understand how many people have finished your level. Well, if you're realizing no one's finishing your level, you can go ahead and give people more time without having to push out a new build, which is a really cool, I think it's cool anyway, a cool way to kind of tweak data without having to push out new builds. So yeah, first off, we're going to look at what I said was title data. So you find this down in the content section. So let's click on content. And in here is where our title data will be. So I've got one that I've made from before. I wonder, can I just get rid of this? Does it not let you just delete one? Surely you can delete, can you? Yes, you can, there we go. So we don't particularly need this. Let's just get rid of this. Delete, delete, delete. Okay, save. So it's no longer there. This is what it'd look like if you're coming in. Okay, so hello there, Booksnell and Anakim as well. Nice to have you in chat. So let's add some new data. Shall we do something similar Like, let's do like how many enemies to spawn, shall we? Like a wave count, like I just said, we could do that. So let's go new title data. In here, we're going to add a new one. We give it a name. So this will be enemies per wave. And then we're going to put in a value here. So let's say at the moment, it's going to be 10 enemies per wave. So we're going to press save. And that is up to date now. That's all you need to do. But we should have a look how we can actually go ahead and use that or interact with that information now, right? So let's go to Unreal. And we're going to go, if you remember, all our Playfab interactions yesterday were via our game instance. So we're going to go back into that Playfab game instance we made. Remember, we had our logic for the different types of UI logins and signups and that we had. Oh, one thing I was going to remind people of. So do you remember I said in order to, you need to set your game ID. So game ID, if you recall, is back on the main screen. If we go to, maybe I should do this in a different page just so we don't lose that. Remember these IDs that we saw on this page? So if you want, instead of setting it like I did here, you can actually do it in a nice easy way of if you just go into your project settings, there's a special Playfab section already. So if you type in Playfab, it should show you the settings down here that you can set up, right? So what I'm going to do is if I just scroll down and go into Playfab, it shows me all of them. So we've got settings, okay, and you can set your title ID in here as well. So that is an easier way to get it done. That wasn't there, that was, I put that in since last stream. So that's something for you to consider, is it's easier than having to set it in your game instance, I guess. Okay. Also, these are like .ini files rather than it being in your code, which is another thing if you want to try and keep things private as well. All right, let's go back to our game instance. So we want to go ahead and use our Playfab API in order to get hold of that data that we just made, right? So we got to try and think how we're going to do that. So first off, let's make an event that we can call, shall we? So realistically, what you do is when you start the level, let's say we had an enemy spawner. The enemy spawner would say, hey, game instance, can you find out how much enemies are meant to be spawning? And then it would use that data. Now, we haven't got an enemy spawner at the moment, so we're just going to keep it simple, okay? So we're just going to pretend that we've got a bit of a back-end game going on. So we're just going to make a function. So we're going to add a custom event. And this custom event is going to be called, let's just call it get, oh, actually, if we want it to return something, it might be nice to make it a function instead. For now, I guess we can just print it, just for demonstration, but we might change this into a function. So let's give this a more meaningful name than just G. So this is going to be get number of enemies from Playfab, just so we're super clear what this function is going to be doing. Okay, and then what we need to do is we need to call one of those Playfab functions. So let's have a look what we've got available to us. So we want to, let's try and think, this is title data, right? So if we go title data, let's see what we've got in here. So we've got a get title data, but if you notice, we have this thing again where we have our admin category and our client category. So let's stick with the client because we're calling from the client. And we're going to go ahead and click on get title data. Okay, so it looks very similar to the ones we did before, right? You have a request going in and then you have a success and a fail. So we're in the same sort of position here. We're going to drag this out and we're going to see what does it need in order to, what does this request need to be filled? So all it needs is the key. So the key is the specific key to search for in the title data. Okay, so you can get all of the data if you leave it as null, which is interesting. But we're just going to go ahead and type in our key. So let's go back to Playfab. Let's go into where we set it up, and it's called enemies per wave. Let's just copy paste that in. That's what we're looking for. So we're requesting the title data that's called enemies per wave. we're dragging that into this event. We need to do our failure, so we can still do this. So this was create event. We made our failure from yesterday. If you weren't here for yesterday, we have a fail event up here, which will just take the error code that comes from a fail request, and it will break the error name, message, and details out and print it to the screen. So that's what we're going to be having a look at using down here. Because it gives you the same signature back, we can just keep reusing that, which is lovely. All right, so then we just need to do our success. So, all right, on success. So what should we call this? So this was get number of enemies per wave success. My naming criteria here is not the best. Sorry, we need to add an event and then give it that name. Apologies. Okay, so now that it's been a success, before what we did with the success, if you remember, is we just loaded a map, right? Because all we needed to know is, oh, we logged in. So once we got a success, we were just opening a level. But now we actually care about that request that's coming back, because we need to know what the value we just asked about is. So if you think we've asked a question saying, hey, Playfab, enemies per wave, what is the value for it right now? And it's going to give it to us via this result struct. So like before, we're going to go and we're going to break this down, and we can get the information that was inside of it. Great. So what this is, this data, if you hover over it, you can see it's a Playfab JSON object reference. So JSON, if you haven't seen it, it's a JavaScript object structure, is it? I can't remember what it stands for, but it's basically a bunch of key pair values in curly braces, and it's used very commonly in web-based stuff. So we basically have a structure where you have a key and then you have a value. So right here, it's saying we get one of those out. Great. So to deal with JSON, there's a helper library as part of the Playfab SDK. So you can call functions such as get. Well, if I just do get, you'll probably see some of the things that you can get out of this. Oh, actually, we're seeing a bunch of stuff. Here we go, in JSON. Get bool field, get number field. So you can choose here what type of thing you're getting from it, right? So ours, I think, if I recall correctly, I think they come as strings. Let me just double check. There's not a bit which it asks us what type of data it is. No, I believe it's going to be received as a string. We can try both to find out then. So let's do a get string. So this is going to look at that JSON pair, and it's going to, we need to tell it, well, it's not going to look at the pair, it's going to look at a list of pairs, because that's what a JSON object is. It's just a massive kind of list of these key pair values. So we need to tell it what is the key of the thing we want to look at. If you remember, we had this key over here, right? So how about we promote this to a variable, and we'll just call this our number of enemy key, or number of waves, enemies key. That's fine. We'll do that, and then we can make sure that we plug that same value in over here. Okay, we'll bring the wire down to try and make it look a little less confusing and artistic, of course. All right, so now that we've gone and looked at this, we're getting some data back, and now we can just use this data. We've got it as a string. So for now, just for testing, we're going to go print string. We're going to make this choose a color in chat. What color should this message be telling us? How many enemy waves we're going to have? What an exciting bit of chat engagement. We have green and we have pink. Well, they're both opposite sides of the color wheel. This is difficult to choose, isn't it? We're going to have to just go halfway, because there's no way I can choose a favorite here, is it? All right, let's go this nice yellow color. Beautiful. We're going to get this show on the screen for not 50 seconds, 5 seconds. Okay, so we're going to give this a go, and I'm going to show you it not working first as well. So let's go to our level, and let's think. We're not calling this yet, right? We're only going to be calling it when we actually somewhere in our code, we've called the name of this function, right? So to make things easy to test, I'm going to add something onto our player character just so I can press a testing key on my keyboard to fire these events so we can see what happens, right? So let's go to our player character. So if you started with the first person project, you should find yourself. If you do Alt-Shift-O, you can search. I think we have a player character somewhere in here. What's it called? Character? First person character, that's the one. So let's go on to that. This is where you have all the logic for shooting and stuff like that, right? But we're just going to add one more down here. We're going to do a key input, or I think it's input. And then you can type some letters in and choose which ones you want. So let me just use, we're on K. K will be fine for me. So let's use the letter K. When I press the letter K, or when I release it, what do we want to do? Well, all this logic is in our game instance. So let's get game instance. We are then going to go and cast this to the type of game instance we've made, where we've defined all these functions. And then from that, it was called get number of enemies. There we go. So we've got two functions, get number of enemies from Playfab, get number of enemies per wave success. Aha, okay. This is a bit, yeah, you want to be wary with that because our success function that we have created here, yeah, you got to be wary that you could accidentally call that as well. I'm trying to think, is there a way for us to not expose that out? But I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure. I tend to work in code, so I've not actually come across many of that those situations before. So, all right. Well, regardless, we know the right one to call. So the right one to call is this get number of enemies from Playfab. So let's go get number of enemies from Playfab. Okay, so now we're calling that when we press the K button. Let's have a look what happens. Let's go to this is the level where we're going to be logged into. And this is going to be the first example of it going wrong. So let's see. So I press K. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Nothing happened at all. This wasn't what I was expecting. I said it'd go wrong, but I didn't expect it to go wrong in this way. Is this hitting? It didn't crash. That's something to be positive about, indeed. Let's put breakpoints in here. Just make sure it's happening. Okay, we are. Are we casting successfully? We are. Okay, now let's jump into this. We are calling get title data. And then it's meant to do one of these two. Okay. If we go back, why is it not printing on the screen? Well, we should be getting an error message, right? And the, oh, we're not getting an error message. Why is it not printing on the screen? I'm so confused at the moment. Right, let me get rid of this debug message. We'll just do a quick build of lights. Where are we? Just to get rid of those messages. And the bug has a bug. Indeed, indeed. Well, what I was going to say is normally what you require, or maybe for a title ID is different actually. For player stuff, sorry. So what I was going to show is that you normally need to log in first. You need to be authenticated with Playfab before you can make these requests. But perhaps for title data, because it's accessible to everyone, that's not so true. So we'll have a look later when we try and look at a player statistic and change that. If we don't log in first, then it won't let us get some player information out. So yeah, that was a mistake on my part. Apologies. However, we can get rid of these breakpoints now. And let's go back into here. And on this, look at this. This is why it wasn't printing. See this connection isn't connected. Well done, Dan. 10 points for me. Okay. So I created a bug intentionally. All right, let's press play. I press K. Can you see that this says 10? Very small in the top of the screen. Let's press it again just so you can see. 10. So it may not be too exciting. You've just got 10 on the screen, but let's take this to another level. Let's change this to 60. Let's make it really difficult. Let's save this. I haven't stopped the game yet. Let's go back into our game. Let's press K. We now get 60. I just made the game really hard. You could even troll a streamer with this. If you're making a game jam game where there's going to be streamers playing your game and giving feedback to your game, when they're playing it, you can make it super difficult if you want. You know, you could spawn more enemies. So it could be really interesting in that means. I mean, it may not make a fair game if that's how you design your game, but something to consider anyway, right? So that dynamic data is pretty interesting because we could use that information in order to change the gameplay. So shall we do something very simple to demonstrate how it would change gameplay? We're not going to go very complicated at all, but if we just make this bit of floor a bit larger. Okay. Let's move our orb out of the way. Okay. Sorry, partly saying, have you heard of Cluster Truck? It has a Twitch mode. It's a game, right? Where it was in GDQ once, games done quickly. And you said, and the devs got on and used their cheats via that. Oh, really? Elliot, how you doing? Welcome along. Welcome along. All right. So what was I going to do? Oh, we're going to make a very quick example. So let's try and think where we're going to do this. This is our shooter project, right? So we will just make a... I guess we will just make our blueprints here because we don't have that many of them anyway. Let me just make it a little bit smaller so we don't lose them off the bottom of the screen. This is going to be an actor. This is going to be called BP Wave Manager or something like that, right? BP Wave Manager. Great. Okay. So the Wave Manager is going to be responsible for spawning in enemies for us. So I guess we should at this point probably make ourselves a enemy as well. So they're probably going to be pawns or characters, right? Let's just make them pawns for now. Let's make this a BP enemy. Okay, great. So with this now, I mean, this thing is confusing. Let's just move that out the way in the sky. We have our Wave Manager. This is going to be controlling how often these enemies spawn. So let's go and set up this Wave Manager to have a bit of information, shall we? So right now it's going to have a variable, which will be an integer, which is going to be related to how many waves to spawn. Number of waves. Number of enemies per wave. Okay, and by default, we're going to set this to a value like 1. Great. Now, one thing we were going to check actually before we get too much further into this is we wanted to check whether we can do get number field and see if it still works. So let's plug this also up into here. And let's use this in there instead. So let's see whether or not we can request it as a number or whether it does come through as a string. So let's press play. Let's press K. It still does come through. So it does read it for us. It'll send it along. And yeah, you can see it's 60.0 there. So good. That time I pressed K, it was 10. 60. Oh, what? Why did it say 10? I'm so confused why it said 10 for a second there. Anyway, right, I'm not going to bog myself down with that. But, okay, so with our enemy Wave Manager, now that we know that we can get that number there, what we're going to do is just set up a little bit of simple logic here. So this also is going to have a type, which is going to be a blueprint enemy variable that we're going to... Actually, we don't even need to do that, actually. No, yeah, we don't even need to. Excuse me, we can get rid of that. So we'll just make some logic in here, which will be... We'll make a function, which is going to be an add event. Why can I never find my add event, custom event. Why do I struggle so much? Every time I struggle. Roy, it's nice to see you. I'm doing well as well, Elliot. Thank you for asking. Yeah. So today, if anyone's joining late, we are going through a sponsored stream by Microsoft Azure as we have a look more into Playfab. Yesterday, we looked at how we log in and get people to sign up with an email address and password. And today, we're looking at how we can store data. So title data, which will be information that's based on your game title. And that'll be the same for everyone who plays your game. And then we'll have a little look later at player data and player statistics, which is ways that you can have information stored per player. And then we'd hopefully use the player statistic in order to create a leaderboard as well. So let's just call this spawn enemies. And this is just going to do create a loop, which is going to be for... why is the font so... I swear I typed in 4 there. All right, let's just do 4 each loop. That's more like it. Oh, crikey, yeah, I just realized it's not an array based. I'm so used to using code. Can you just do a number based loop? You can, right? A for loop, is that the one we want? There we go. Okay, so up until there, we want to go ahead and we want to spawn an enemy. So we want to go spawn actor from class, and we can choose our BP enemy. Okay. And where's it going to spawn it? Well, we're going to add in some spawn locations for this now. So spawn transform, we're going to do it. We'll just do this in a super simple way. Isn't there like a point or something like that you can use? Yeah, target point. So we'll give our wave manager an array of these target points. So this is going to be a target point. We want it to be an array of them. We'll call these spawn points. We'll compile this and save it. And then what we can do is we can choose, we can spawn one, instead of choosing them random, because this is just such a simple example, we can just choose one based on the index, right? So as long as we've got more spawn points than we have waves, we should be fine. So we want to go ahead and get this. So we want to get the index from that, and then we want to get our world position, or get transform. Can you get that? Get actor transform, and then we can whack that in there. So now our enemies will know where to spawn. So let's go ahead and set this up quickly. We're in our level. We've got our, we can get rid of this. No, we can keep the target point, I guess, right? So let's add in a few of these target points quickly. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's just go for 6 for now, shall we? Okay, so we've got 6 target points. We then go to our wave manager, and we need to set up our, we should have one member on here. I may not have exposed it. Spawn points, did I? Nope, let's go into here. Okay, so let's make this, is it instance editable? I believe. Okay, so now if we have a look at it, our wave manager, spawn points is in here. And we can go ahead and just select the different target points that I've got. So I'm going to add the 6 different points that we've got in here quickly, or as quick as my old man hands can do. Okay, good. And then finally, we also had this value in here, right, which was number of enemies. And we set it as default for 1. Let's just set that to 3. Okay, so if we start the game now, hopefully we can call spawn enemies. So in begin play, let's just call spawn enemies. So now when we start this, oh yeah, well, my enemies are invisible. I haven't actually given them a mesh yet. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's give them a static mesh so you can see them. What are they going to look like? I reckon they're going to look like cones. Dangerous cones. Look at them. Menacing. Ooh, give me the heebie-jeebies. All right, how big is that cone? Hopefully we'll find out. There we go. Okay, so you can see I've made a mistake with my loop. I went up to the number of them, but an array loop starts on 0. So I went 0, 1, 2, 3. So that's 4 different instances. So we'd probably just want to change the logic in our spawner quickly. I know it's just an example one, but we'd change this to be -1. So let's get our minus. Oh, it's doing that thing where the UI doesn't show for me again. This is a shame. Unreal messing up for me. It's okay, we can test this quickly. So we should now get 3 enemies spawn. Great. So that's just a basic spawner, right? But the idea here is we can feed that value via Playfab instead. So we can change it dynamically without having to repackage our game each time, which is cool. So I'm just going to restart Unreal because it was I was getting some UI issues, unfortunately. Let's open this back up again. Indeed, books now. Spacey. I'm glad you're having a good day. Okay, let's open all of these. So now what we need to think is how can we arrange the flow of that data? So I guess what we could do is if we were in our enemy manager, I guess we would we need to think about how we're going to get the callback from this. So this data, we need to go ahead and set it in our enemy manager. Now there's nice ways you can structure your code in that. We're not going to be too concerned about doing that. But I'm not too sure if, am I able to do, can you get world in here? I don't think, because we're in the instance. I don't know if it allows you to, can you get the world? No, okay, so we might instead call this, that would make more sense, and have it return a value. I was just hoping not to have to do that, but okay, let's go ahead. I'm hoping this works. So if we try and collapse this into a function, no, is it because it's got get title data cannot be placed in a, is it because it's a wait? Yeah, so in functions you're not actually allowed to go ahead and do that. Okay, so we can get around this in a nice easy way. Let's just go ahead and make a variable. As I said, you might want to come up with a more elegant solution to this, but this is just going to be called number of enemies per wave. And this is going to be public, so we can access it elsewhere. So then when we get this back, we'll print it, but we're also going to go ahead and set this value, right? So let's hold Alt, drag this on, and then we can pop in the number that we got from there. It's going to be truncating because it's treating it as a float, but that's fine by me. I think everything implicitly assumes access to get world in blueprints via context. Oh, well, that you pass it a context object, is it? Yeah, to be honest, I think this way is smoother rather than the game instance searching for your enemy wave spawner anyway. So we'll probably carry on with this. Okay, so we're setting that value. So now what we can do, if this is happening right at the start of the game, we're just gonna, this should happen before the begin play gets called anyway, but just to be doubly safe, we want to give Playfab a chance to come back to us and give us the answer, right? And then what we want to do is our wave spawner, wherever I made it, wave manager here, we're then going to go ahead and spawn enemies that way. So let's give this just a delay. As I said, you'd want to come up with a nicer way to do this, but we're just doing it as a quick example. Let's put in 3 seconds should be enough there. And then we're going to spawn our enemies. And instead of using this value, what we're going to do is we're going to go and get that value from our player instance. So we can then go get our, not player instance, apologies, our game instance. Game instance, we want to cast this. Let's bring this back so we can connect these wires. Okay, so then what we want to do is we want to get hold of that number of enemies per wave. Get number of enemies, that's the one. And then we can just plug this one in here instead. That didn't go in, there we go. And now we don't need that local variable anymore. So we're now using the one from the game instance instead. Okay, so that works fine for me. We're minusing 1 off of that. I think this should work. Let's hope so. So we've only got 6 spawn points, remember. So yeah, we need to make sure that we use numbers that are smaller than 6. Otherwise, my logic is a bit, I haven't done safety checks now, so it'll crash. So let's go to Playfab and let's make sure that our enemies per wave is a nice happy value of 5. Save. Okay, great. So let's go back to our game. We'll go back to the main level. Let me just try and skip straight to that Playfab login level. Okay, so keep in mind now, it's going to get the data. We should have a default value actually, just to make sure that we know what's happening. Let's go into our Playfab game instance. This number of enemies, we'll give this a default value of 1. So if there's only 1 enemy spawning, we know it's using the default. But if we get 5 spawning, we know it's reading from Playfab. So let's have a look at that, shall we? Okay, so I press 3 seconds goes by. There's 1 enemy. So has it not worked for us? It could be that it hasn't worked, so we're going to have a look into that. Oh, hang on. Have I got to press K? Oh, yes. Okay. If you remember, I was only going to get that data when I was pressing K. My mistake there. So what we need to do is, before in our this instance, game instance, we were calling this only when I pressed the K button on the keyboard. What we're going to do instead is just call it in here. So we will call get number of enemies per, there you go, that one. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. Now we press play. We're going to give it 3 seconds. Okay, here, can you see it says not authenticated? This was the error I was trying to show you earlier. But I think once you log in once, you're authenticated for a session then perhaps. And I think maybe that's why it worked earlier. So you've got to make sure that your player logs in so that they can make these requests. So we are going to load from our main level. Sorry for having to jump around a little bit here. Let's go and press play. Let's log in. Now let's see what happens. We're still only getting 1, and it still says that we're not authenticated. Have I used a server-based one accidentally, possibly? Or, I know what it is. No. I know what it is. I think, anyway. So my guess is, when we try and call this, we haven't... this point... we haven't logged in. It's going to try and do it instantly, but we haven't logged in yet. Okay, this is a bit of like jank issues on my part. So I tell you what, how about we go in, I'll press the K key as soon as we go in to get that value. And then we'll see whether it works in that situation. So we'll press login. I'm going to press K. And now we get our 5 enemies spawning because it read the value from Playfab. It's a bit janky how I'm having to press K, but realistically you'd have a bit of a nicer setup. You can work on a structure of how you would communicate the data from Playfab to your level objects and when you need to do that as well. But that is one thing to consider. You do need to take into account that these are web requests. So it's going to take a little bit of time to be sent and come back to you. And then you need to process that request. So you're kind of doing like a wait or async sort of stuff where something else is off doing its job and you're waiting for it to come back. So your other game logic has got to handle that as well and just be designed around that. So let's try and change that value and see it happen in real time like we did earlier. So we're going to edit this. This time we just want 3 enemies. We press save. The player then plays the next level, for example. So there we go. They play the next level. They press, and this time we have 3 enemies come in. So yeah, that's one use of how you can access data that's on your Playfab title. And we're going to now try and progress that a little bit to look at statistics instead. And it follows a similar sort of pattern, really. Now, things like this, I should say, are totally safe to do this way. You don't need to think about having server authoritative getting title data, because you're just retrieving information, right? Now, when it comes to player statistics or player data, where you might be recording things like high scores or currency, for example, then it becomes a little bit more challenging, because it's not easy to make hacks for video games, but people who know how to do it do have the means to. Essentially what they do is they look at the kind of active memory on the computer, and they work out where, like, in your memory is the bits of data that's holding how much money you've got, for example. And then they inject data into that, so that technically in your game, when it looks how much money I've got, it'll look at the new data that they've put in. So if you think that people can do that, that means that they can set their money as high, and then if you sent a request from the client saying, okay, update my money, and you made the Playfab database or the Playfab record of your user then have that much money, you've allowed a cheater to update their data record with wrong information, which isn't going to be fair for the rest of the players either. So when you're doing player sensitive things, especially in multiplayer games, I would recommend doing things in a server authoritative way. And that's where that cloud script comes in really handy, because you can, everything that happens on Playfab side is protected. Hackers who are trying to write cheats for your games won't have a way to access your Playfab server. You know, obviously they could guess your admin password. That's a different story. But in terms of manipulating the code, they're not going to be able to have a way to change what's happening in your server-side code and your server-side logic. So we're today going to be doing client-based stuff. So I'm just giving that pre-warning that this is not the safest way to do it. But because, as I mentioned at the start of the stream, it's recently changed where you can't write the cloud script in the within Playfab directly like you used to be able to. So you used to be able to go into automation and have a section where you could write functions, and then you would just, in Unreal Engine, you would just go ahead and you would call them. You could just call a cloud script function as a one of these little functions that we're calling in the Playfab SDK. But because we can't do that anymore, you use something called Azure functions instead. I'm not fully versed in those, so we're not going to be learning them today, but that would be the route you'd go down to get something a little bit more server authoritative. So, Dedro, you asked, how would you go about persisting a user across sessions? So, if I to understand your question correctly here, Dedro, that's almost the point of Playfab, is that you're creating a persistent record for your players that is hosted on a web database by Playfab. And what that means is you can then upload and sync your data. At the end of a session, you could send your players current important details that you want them to load next time they come in. And then whenever a player joins the game, they can say, okay, fetch the information for this player. You wait for it to come down, you populate it onto the player, and then they get control of their player with the same stats as they had last time. So that would be player-based stuff. And there's something we've been looking at, so far we've been looking at this title data, but there is something called player data as well. So if I go into players, again, sad Dan only has the one player. Uh-oh, it's struggling to find me at the moment. I'm too good. Let's refresh this. What was my name? Dan? Okay, I just had to search. It couldn't find amongst the other players. Okay, so if I go into my record now, there is something called player data in here, right? So you have two things. Player data is per game title. So if you imagine I'm a publisher, Honest Dan Games, and I make 3 games. We make a donkey riding simulator. We make a puzzle room game, and we make a Dan Flight Simulator 2022. So we have 3 different titles. So you can still information on players per title, so you can have a separate level for each one of those. Donkey Riding Simulator, I am on level 12, but on Flight Sim, I have the same level kind of field, but that would be a different value, for example. But you can also do it by publisher if you want. So you could have a Honest Dan Games like rating. So in any of those games you play, you can, every achievement you unlock, you would up the Honest Dan Games rating, for example. So there's different ways that you can use it. I'm sure you can think of creative ways to use things as well. But the player data, if we go into this, it's actually empty. So you have three different types here. Player data, this is going to be accessible to you from the client, or you can make requests and change it. You have read-only data, and this is, as you'd guess, read-only. And then internal data is stuff that would only be accessible on the server. Okay. I've just got a question. So is Playfab hard to set up or use in Blueprint? No, I've used only Blueprint so far. I normally do code, but I decided to use Blueprint because I thought it'd be a little bit more accessible for people with this. And yeah, you just download a Playfab SDK on the Unreal Engine store. It's free, and then you can go ahead and use it. So I did a stream yesterday. If you can check my Twitch VODs, or I'll check it on YouTube soon. That'll go through the initial setup if you're interested. So Halt C wants a donkey riding puzzle room, and Outfrost wants a donkey flight sim. I see. All these ideas. Maybe I should quit this streaming stuff and just focus on these good game ideas. Okay, so what you can do here, it's a little bit surprising, I guess. Some of this a little bit was for me, because I expected to be able to set a player piece of data for all players. So for example, say I wanted one called rank, and currently you start as rank 1. The thing is, this is for Dan. So I've given Dan a rank, but if I was to go and make a new player, so if I go into players, oh, did I not save that? Apologies. We are trying to sneak out of here without saving. Ah, yeah, okay, cool. So we saved it there, great. So I've added that bit of data in there now, right? But if I go back to players and we add, I think you can add a test player, can't you? Okay, create and login player. Let's just do that. So we should have 2 players now, I'm hoping, if this works. Cross your fingers for me. Okay, there we go, 2 players. We only have 998 more players that we can fit in this game. So you better sign up quickly. All right, so with this person now, if I went into their player data, you would hope that maybe, okay, they would all have that rank now, but you can see they don't. So the player data can be individual based. It's not like a database where you have all these fields set up already for you. So try and think of it a bit like if you've used Unity before, there was a thing called player prefs, which was basically a key pair value system where you can save stuff locally. I think it's saved in the registry on the computer you're using. But one thing you had to do with that, let's say you saved a rank in that. You could go and say, hey, find out my rank. But if the rank didn't exist, it would throw an error. You'd say, get me the key called rank. But you'd have to check it existed before trying to read it, because it wasn't made unless you set it once. So it works in the same way here, that you would ideally want to default these values to a set value when you start, so that everyone has a value for it. There might be some data you want to set where not every player has it, right? So there are ways to do this. I'm not going to be able to demo it today because the way I knew how to do it is kind of gone, since I can't use the cloud script in the old way anymore. But there's a thing, if we go into automation and you go into rules. So rules is a way for you to set up some automated behavior. I go into new rules, and in here, let's just say set starting stats for players, for new player. Now, this is going to be, and you've got all of these different types of events now. There's a special name for them. What were they called? Playstream events. That's what these are. So Playstream events are a bunch of already implemented Playfab hooks. So when the player logs in, it will fire this event. and you can kind of hook into it. So there's a bunch of different events that you can hook into, and there is a list you can click on and you can go and have a look through. So the API here isn't too bad. You can just go and search, but we want like when a new player enters the game. So where is it? It's player, is it added or? Yeah, player added title, that's the one. So if we click on that, this event is triggered when a player creates a new account for a title. Okay, cool. It's once per title, bro. So let's go ahead and hook that up. So it was player added, I think it was, right? There you go. So this is where then you can add actions. So whenever we get this event, you can do some cool things in here. Like you can say, I want to send them an email and say, hey, welcome to Ultimate Donkey Simulator, and give them tips on how to play. I'm sure you've had it when you've signed up for a game kind of account before, that they send you an email welcoming you or something along those lines, right? So you can do things like that. But what you used to be able to have in here was to execute a cloud script, but now it's execute an Azure function. So what you could go ahead and do there is once you've set up your Azure functions, and again, apologies, I can't show you how to do that today. Hopefully in the future, I can do some content on that. But you could make it run a custom little script, which would effectively say, for this player, can you add player data of ranking and set it to 0? So you can do some kind of data initialization in that way. But until then, you should definitely be checking to make sure when you try and get data, was it a successful attempt to get the data? Okay, so we were talking about this initially just because we were talking about player data, right? So let's go back to players. Can we get all of our, right, there we go. We've got this person here. So this was their normal account, right? And we want to go and look at their player data. So yeah, this is how you store individual data, and it can be strings. It can be, I think you can actually store different types of data as well. I don't have an exhaustive list here to go through, but you can store values against keys here. Now, there is another type of data that you can also store, and they call that player statistics. So player statistics is like player data, but it will automatically be added to all of your players, as far as I understand. And also, there's some restrictions on it. It has to be a number, and there's some rules you can set on how player statistics are added. So we'll have a look how to do one of those now. So the way I've gone about this is if you were to create a leaderboard, it'll automatically go ahead and create a statistic for you, which is going to be what you are tracking in that leaderboard there. So let's go into leaderboards, and let's make a new leaderboard, and we'll call this top kills if we're doing a shooter game. So Dedra, you were saying, I'm assuming matchmaking is also possible with Playfab, like looking for players in a queue in the same rank and putting them together in a game. Excuse me. Yes, so I'm not covering any of that, but it is within part of the Playfab backend that you can host multiplayer servers, you can have matchmaking, you can have kind of voice over IP stuff all within this kind of backend. So you can check out a lot of the features. If you click on the link here and you go into the Microsoft Game Stack page, and then if you look for Playfab in there, you should be able to find a bit more information about all the different stuff that you can do in there. You do have to pay for some of the higher tier, or if you've got lots of users, but there's plenty you can do on the free tier as well. Okay, so we're looking at player statistics, and we're going to add one by creating a leaderboard and just adding it this way. I wonder, is there a way to just add a... Let me cancel this. I want to see, is there a way that I can just add a statistic manually? I feel like there should be a way to do this. Content seems to be with just my title. Leaderboards is a way to add statistics, but I don't feel... Should we have a little look? How to add a new Playfab statistic. Oh, this is the whole thing. Oh yeah, there is one thing will need to do in a moment, and I'll show you how to do that in a sec. But I'm not too sure whether the documentation will give us what we. All right, how do we add? So you can do it via code. But are you able to add it via the Playfab login? Yeah, it seems to be that you just do it via leaderboards. So I was showing you the right way to do it. It just, for me, I kind of would have expected to have a section that said statistics. But okay, we'll go ahead with this regardless. So where were we? We're in here. We were going to make a new leaderboard, and we're going to just call this top kills. Now, with leaderboards, you have a, how often do you want them to be reset? You could have a daily one, and this system will automatically clear it for you at the end of the day, which is nice. You can have a monthly one, and if you know, you may have noticed up here, there's like a prize table section. So you might have like in-game currency that you reward players with based on where they are in the table. So that's something you can set up via this system as well. So lots of cool stuff that is possible. So we're not going to ever reset it automatically. This is going to be an all-time top kills, right? And then the aggregation method, this is what I was on about with statistics, why it's a little bit different to just player data, is there's certain rules in how you can change this value. So this one here, if you try and set this statistic, it will always do the most recent value that you give it. So that'll let you change it to any numeric value. If we go for maximum, it will always keep the value that is the highest. So let's say I've got a high score of 10, two hands, and I submit a score of 20, then it'll go, which is the highest out of those 20? All right, their statistic for top kills is 20. Let's carry on from that scenario, and I play another round. I die really early with a score of 6. Now it's going to compare 6 to 20, and it's going to go, right, 20's higher. So it doesn't update the statistic. So you can see why it suits a leaderboard using the statistics this way, because you have these kind of preset rules over how data is updated, which is handy. You might want to have like a total, like total kills here. That might work. For us, we could do a sum where it just continually adds every time you call it. But yeah, I guess it depends. We're probably going to do it where it's not like a total kills. This is just top kills in one session. So let's do maximum. And let's rename this to make sure it's a bit clear. Top kills in a game, let's say, right? Just so we don't get confused what we mean by top kills. Let's say most kills in a game. There we go, a little bit clearer. So we'll hit save. And now you can see we have a leaderboard. It has no results, which is a sad state of affairs. I know, I'm sad too. But we're going to try and figure out now how we write to this. And I know roughly what we need to do, but there's one little bit I need to figure out in Blueprint. So anyone who wants to help in chat, it'd be appreciated. But all right, we're going to just do some test data. We're not going to make a game and get a score. We could do that if there's time at the end of the stream. But for now, we're just going to, like we did, bind it to a key and just call it. So let's think how we want to go ahead and do this. This was our, tell you what, let's just group all this together. We'll put it in a color. So this was going to be setting our kills. Let's just do it purple. That's fine, whatever. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to make a new one now. So we're going to create a custom event as well. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and call this one send most kill, or send kills as statistic or something like that, let's say. Okay, so we would call this, once the game is finished, you would get your score, and then you would get your game instance and say, hey, send this kill. So we would need to give a bit of input here, which is going to be our number. So let's change this to, an integer so it can track how many kills. This would be number of kills. There we go. And now we need to try and figure out this next bit. So like before, we've gotten used to this pattern now. There's normally just a Playfab function we can call, which will have a request, an on success, and a failure. So let's see what's in here when we type update. And let's go down into Playfab. Oh, we're in there already. So we're in server. Let's close down server because we're not going to be on the server. We want to look at the client side of stuff. Here we are. Oh yeah, there's loads in here. So let's narrow this down a bit. Update player something. Player statistic. Okay, we've got some in here. So this is admin. Let's have a look in the client one. There we go. We've got update player statistic. We also have update user data. This is going to be that player data that I was talking about earlier. But we're looking at the player statistics. So we're going to click on this. Now, we have our on failure and our on request. So we can do the failure quickly. We'll just do a create event. We'll call that on failure that we've been using the whole time. Happy days. And then on success, we don't really need to do much either with this, right? We're just going to go ahead and say, create a new event. This is going to be send kill stats statistics success. Let's just call it that. So from here, we're going to go ahead and probably just print successfully sent, just so we know. So stats were sent. Great. Okay, now the one bit we haven't done yet, and this is the tricky bit for me, because I haven't got used to using this with Blueprint at the moment, is if we go into the request and we do what we normally do, which is we make client update player statistic request. The difference here is we need to give it an array of JSON objects. So instead of just giving it a key like we were used to doing before, like if we look up this one, we just had to give it the enemies per wave, the name of the data that we were getting. This time, because we're sending data, we need to give it the key and the value that we're setting. However, we need to do it as an array, which doesn't sound complicated, but in Blueprints, I tried doing it quickly earlier and I couldn't get it to work. So we might need to figure it out. If I'm going to use Playfab, are there any changes in the usual UE4 multiplayer workflow? I wouldn't say there's changes to how you do things in Unreal. I would just say that you'd need to definitely think about which bits the server are doing and which bits the clients are doing. So yeah, it shouldn't change your normal Unreal Engine multiplayer flow. It would just kind of hook into that same server-only logic that you might be running and your client-only logic that you're running. To my understanding, Dedra, I've not implemented it to see, but yeah, I can't imagine from what I've looked into so far that it would alter the way that you've structured your online game. That you just need to make those decisions about whether you want it to be server authoritative or client authoritative in terms of setting data. So, Andre, you were saying related to the leaderboard statistic, you could create a leaderboard name by setting a statistic to a player from the players page, and it would populate the leaderboards list. Does it work? Does it work in that way? Setting a statistic to a player. Oh, can you set a statistic in there? Can you? Let's go and have a look. So we've got this here. Let's go into our game in a different tab. And let's go into players. Let's go and look at our default friend player. I can't remember what their name was now. Here they are. They don't even have a name. All right, should we give them a name? Does this count as their actual name though? Username. Okay, yeah, let's give them a username. Oh, we can't. So this must be the anonymous kind of signing in thing that we had. Okay, no problem. I just wanted a way to identify them. We're just going to call them Steve. All right, good old Steve. Let's save that. Oh yeah, so someone asked yesterday about can you link accounts. This looks like you can I think it was partly Atomic who asked. It looks like you may be able to link accounts to different auth methods, possibly. But let's carry on. So if we went into our player data, you're saying that we can add a statistic in here? Because the thing is, player data and player statistics are different as far as I'm aware. So I don't think you can make a... is there a statistics tab that I've missed? Oh, there is. Okay. Yeah, so you could manually add it in there. I see what you're saying, Andre. Okay. Yeah, my mistake. You can add them manually, but it is per player again, right? But that would give me a way to make one about something that already exists. Yeah, it'll appear in leaderboards then. So if I go ahead and add this one, and we give it a statistic that's called, let's say, is I can't even think of a deal. I was just going to say since it's a fake account, but let's just make the statistic about like logged in count. So how many times they've logged in, and let's say that they've got a value of 7 for that. So let's save that. And then you were saying if we then go to our leaderboards, yeah, the logged in count, it creates it automatically for you. Interesting. All right. There we go. We're learning as we go, and we can see Steve's name is in there. That's cool. It's good because that'll give us a nicer way to add some test data. So thank you for pointing that out. Okay, so one thing I should say, if you're going to use a client function like this where you update player statistics, this is a client API call. Remember earlier I said it's not super safe to do this. You do need to set something up in Playfab to allow that. So if you go to your game settings and you go into title settings, you go to the API features, and in this list here, there you go, you can find a tick box here, and that will allow you to post player statistics from the client. It does give you a warning here. In the same way that the client can add virtual currency, it may allow them to cheat. So you have to opt into this. So that's something to consider anyway. Okay, we can go back to our leaderboards now. We can go into our most kills in a game that we were setting up. And we're going to try and figure out how we can post a high score to this. And then finally, we'll try and wrap up by looking how we can retrieve the leaderboard from Playfab. Sorry, I had a slurp mid-sentence then, didn't I? All right, so what we need to do is to make an array of JSON objects here. So we can, I know you can construct a JSON object. Okay, so you can construct, you can do a value. What if you do number value? How does that look? Do you need to set it like that? Okay, let's just say that our kill statistic is going to be that converted across, right? So number of kills will get called, and it gets set to that, and then we need to construct a we need to pass that into our JSON though, right? What does this give us? JSON value object reference. I don't think that's the right thing to do, because this is a JSON object. So we kind of need to make an array. Okay, so let's use the other one. So we want to construct a JSON object instead. From this, you can call things like set string value field. Okay. Now the name of the thing that we want to be setting is called most kills in a game. Let's just paste that into, I mean, we can promote that if we want. Let's call it most kills in a game key. Compile it, we'll give it that default value. Great. Okay, that's never going to change, so we can keep that there. And then the value is what we're setting. I guess it's not really a string, it needs to be a number. So that's a mistake. Let's set number field instead. Get rid of that. Okay, we still need the field name. We're then going to pass in this number into there. Let's get rid of that. And then what we want to do is to chuck that into an array, right? But the thing is, this is what was getting me earlier, actually, I remember now, is when you set a number field, can you see you don't have an out pin? So you're setting it, but then you can't access it. And if I pull from here, I'm just going to be creating a new one again. So I think we've got to actually just like set this as a local like variable. So if we promote this to a variable, and we'll call this our most kills in a game JSON. So we're going to first off create that so that we got a reference to it. Then we're going to use that to set the number field of that JSON object. Let me just plug these in correctly like that. Okay, then we basically need to chuck it into that, right? But it needs to be an array instead. So you can just do add. Is there an array? There should be. There you go. So we can now add, hopefully, if we just get this value now, we should be able to plug that into there, right? Ah, hold on. So we're adding it to, but we don't have an array. Or can you create from make array? Okay, you can make an array from. Is that how we'd do it? Like so. Perhaps that's how we would do it. So this makes a new array from our most kills in game JSON, which will have been set back here. Does this look alright to anyone who's following in chat at the moment? So once we have set that, none of this is going to get called. This bit is going to get called until it gets to this. And it makes that request. So the request is passing in that array. And then in here, we're going to go ahead and send the kill statistic across. Okay, so stats were sent. That's what we want to do. Great. So we need to try and call this and to see if it works. I think I did something like this earlier and it didn't work. So we may need to debug if not. But let's do it in the same way as before. We're going to just call this from our player character. When we press, let's do another button, sorry. So this will be input. Let's just do L this time because it's next to K. So when we press L, we're going to do this casting again. And then this time we're going to call send kills as statistic, like so. And we're going to give it a new number of kills. So let's just say we have killed 10 people this round. Okay. So let's see what happens, shall we? If you keep in mind, let's double check our Playfab now. We have nothing in here in most kills in a game. So we need to go and have a look to see, is it going to work for us? Is it going to add anything to it? So we press login. We're into this level. The enemy, don't worry about the enemy spawning there. That was our old code. I'm going to press L. Okay, so this is what I saw earlier. So it says invalid input parameters, statistics 0, statistic name, dot statistic name, and then it says the statistic name. Let's read that out again. Where is it? Here, the statistic name field is required. So it's making out as if, okay, the request here, it does look like it's sending the request. Right? It's sending this request statistics, most kills in a game, 10. So that does look kind of correct. Oh, does it need a version as well? Oh, the version isn't. Oh, I see how it works then. Okay, that's where I was going wrong, I think. let's have a look. So what Andre is saying in chat is that it needs to be a JSON structure that says statistics name colon and then the name of the statistics member and then value colon and then the number. Okay, let's use that to try and think about how we'd structure this then. So would I need to make 2 fields then? So this is just an inner bit of Is JSON the whole structure? It is, isn't it? So instead of setting it as field name, this would need to be like I don't know, it takes in a string. What was the data that we're actually sending into it again? Let's have a look in here. Yeah, okay, I know what we got to do. I've got it. So what we need to do is we do need that number 1, but before that, we're also gonna, first off, the field name isn't gonna be that. We can disconnect that. The field name here is gonna be value. And then we need to do another one in here. So we've made a JSON struct. After that, we want to do set a string field. And the string field is going to be our statistic name. And our string value is going to be, that's where we use this most kills in a game key. So we're building up on this. This needs to go in there as well. It's a little unclear because the lines are going through, but it is going to both of them here. Okay. And the number goes into that one. Let's see if that works. Thank you so much, Andre, for helping me see the error of how I was constructing that JSON then. So we'll have our 1 enemy spawn. Don't worry about those. If we go ahead and press L now. Stats were sent. How exciting. Okay. So let's go and have a look. Let's refresh. Holy smokes. We've got a little bit of leaderboard data going in. Now let's tweak that, shall we? Because if you remember, we set up a rule on this. So if we go into our leaderboard, the statistic itself is maximum. So let's do 2 tests, shall we? The 2 tests are going to be, first off, let's set this up so that we call this with a value that is higher. Let's set it to 20. We press save, we go ahead and play our game again. And when I press L, stats were sent. I'm going to go and check, I refresh. It's gone to 20. Wonderful. Now, let's try the other way around. Let's go, press stop. We're going to go in, and this time we're going to send a score of a measly 3. Didn't have a good game. We press save. We'll play the game one more time. I'm going to press my key to send that event. Stats were sent. We're going to refresh this. And it stays as 20 because we set that rule. If we were to change the leaderboards, let's go and have a look and change this to last always. And we run it again. Stats were sent. Refresh. 3 has changed. So can you see that you can control which way these statistics are updated? And that's important based on how you're doing it. If you were doing how fast someone has played through a level, then you'd want the minimum if you were using a time value. If you were doing a high score, then you'd want the maximum. If you wanted something that is going to matter each time they play it, I can't imagine that would be like a leaderboard. It'd be more of just an interesting stat to look at, but maybe someone in chat can think of an idea of how that could feed into a leaderboard. Then you could go ahead and do that. Sometimes they have, you might have a bunch of different leaderboards that you can toggle through, and you could have one that says like previous games score. You know, you could have something like that if you wanted, so you can see how your other friends are getting on, not just instantly get the best result, right? Okay, so that was straightforward, right? I tell you what, shall we go ahead and add someone else into our database as well? Let's edit the leaderboard back to be maximum. And then let's also go into our players. We've got our little fake player that I made. Why is it not showing me my fake player? Is it cast out with an 8, did it? No. Curses. There it is. It did stats. Oh, if I search for Steve, does it show him now? Spell Steve right, Dan. It does. Okay, we can find Steve easier now. All right, so now if we went into the statistics for Steve and we add, can you add one that's already done? Yeah, you can. So if we say, okay, Steve has got most kills in a game of 80, because Steve is really good. We then press save, we go to our leaderboards, and most kills in a game, we can see that Steve is roaring ahead of poor Honest Dan Games. As Softerman says in chat, 3 is more like an Honest Dan performance. I agree. I agree. But there we go. So we now have a bit of a leaderboard going, right? There's only 2 people on it, but it's still a leaderboard. We're going to have a look now at how we can try and get hold of that information to pull it back. So I hadn't done this bit before, but using the Playfab API is pretty straightforward. You normally just type in some of the keywords and there's a function for it, right? So the nice thing about this is it's safe, again, the leaderboard, right? So the client can do this without you feeling like it's a risk, because all they're doing is reading data, right? So shall we have a look if we can figure out how to do it? So let's make a new event, and custom event. This is going to be get leaderboard. Let's just do it for now because we need to, I don't know the structure it comes back in at the moment for us. So we want to go here, we're going to call Playfab function, probably going to be called get leaderboard. Get leaderboards for user. Get leaderboards. Okay, we're in the client, so it is going to be the client-based ones that we want. Okay, so we can get a leaderboard for user character. So, player, yeah. So you can, the reason we got character in there as well is you can actually store like characters per title. So if you imagine you had a game like Skyrim, you have many character slots. You can make a bunch of different characters and you might want to save information, just the one user still, but you might want to have like character specific data saved. So I think that's what the character is. This around, I think that is for if you have a leaderboard, instead of showing the whole leaderboard, it'll just make sure that it shows where the current player who requests it is, and it'll show the people who are just above them and just below them. It's like a contextual one. Nice. Do you have a link to that, Andre? I'm not super experienced at doing like API calls manually. I've done a bit with like Twitch stuff, but I much prefer having a library to help me with it. So, but yeah, happy to have input for sure. So Andre was just saying that the Playfab REST API docs, all the functions are on there in case you don't know exactly the object that is required and what options it has. So that's how like Andre knew that the kind of format that was expected there. So let's open up this link here. And we have ourselves this is the REST API, right? So could we look up leaderboard in here? Okay, so get leaderboard. Retrieves a list of ranked users from the given statistics starting from the indicated point in the leaderboard. And this is what you would, this is the HTTP kind of post request. This is what is actually happening behind the scenes that the Playfab SDK we downloaded for Unreal is doing on our behalf. Okay, that's cool. And then we've got what we need to send, start position. So we'll probably see all of this pop up now when we go ahead and make the request. So what was it called? Get leaderboard. There we go. And as always, it's the same structure as before. We just want to go ahead and see what's in this struct. Bobek Belinik, a pleasure as always to see you. How are you getting on? We are starting our charity 9 days of charity stream fundraising starting tomorrow, along with the Honest Jam as well. You've yet to have an API call work. Are you trying along there, Booksnell? Is it you trying HTML stuff? And what sort of change are you trying to make? Did you see the bit earlier where if you're calling from client, you need to like enable it? But I guess if you haven't had any API call, it might be a different problem to that. Okay, let's make one of these client get leaderboard requests. What does it want from us then? Custom tags, we probably can ignore that. Max result counts. Default 10, maximum 100, even though the default here is 0. So that's probably just Unreal defaulting it to 0 there. So let's just say we want to get the top 10, the start position from 0, the statistic name. So this is where we open up our Playfab window. Where are we? Most kills in a game. Wonderful. For the specific version, we'll leave that. Okay. Yeah, I'm not too sure what those are. Let's see if we can get away with not having to do them. I mean, we have got a variable for this. So let's plug that in so we don't make typing mistakes. On the failure, we'll just create our custom event that we've made for failure before. And then for success, we're going to just add an event, which is going to be called our on get leaderboard success. Okay. Now, this is another case where we actually need to use, it's given us information back, right? So we need to get something out of this. So let's look what the result looks like. We're going to go ahead and break it. And we get a leaderboard, which is a struct, an array, sorry, of JSON objects, an ordered listing of the users and their positions. So this is what was really handy, I think, from what Andres linked us in chat earlier, is if we go into this, where was it? Here, it'll probably tell us what we get back, will it? Or does it not? Get leaderboard result. Can you click on that? Player leaderboard entry. Right, hang on. So the result is made up of a and you can do it with friends and that. If you've logged into Playfab using Steam or Xbox Live and that, like we said yesterday, you can make it take into account your friends on there, which is cool. So we have leaderboard, next reset and version. So we probably want to get the leaderboard entry and get out of it another JSON object, which is going to be the player leaderboard entry. And then inside of that, we're going to have a list of display name and position and the value. Okay. So let's go ahead and print these out to screen. Realistically, you'd want to chuck this in a UI, right? You want this to appear on your screen. You'd make a UMG kind of interface like we did for our login system yesterday. And then you would fill out different rows of data or however you want to display it, right? So let's see if we can figure out how to do this then. So where were we? Here. Okay, so first we're going to break this down. So I think it's, hang on, it's an array though. I didn't expect it to be an array. I think it's possibly, I think the Unreal thing here has automatically just gotten out for us the leaderboard part of it. I think it's already pulled that out for us. Looking at that, that's why it's an array of these. That makes sense to me. So we're going to just go straight for this player leaderboard, and we're going to use this bit of information that we've got to pull it out. So we want display name, position, and stat value. So we're going to pull this out, and we want to loop over each one, I guess. So this is what we'd want to do over here. So for each one in here, it's gonna print a backwards leaderboard, but we'll go with it. Let me just move this down so we've got plenty of space as well. I'm getting a bit clustered up there. So yeah, what we want to do here then is we get the array element, which is a JSON object, and then we want to get a, I guess we can get the username, so that'll be get a string field. The string field is going to be display name. I'll copy that. Really useful page. Thank you for helping me with that earlier, Andre. We also want to get... I see, we're going to get all of... No, statistic value. What's the other one I was going to use? Oh, the position, of course, the position. That's what I'm forgetting here. All right, we can probably treat this as a string because we're going to just display it. We're not actually doing any numerical data with it, right? So we can go get string field as well from here. And this one is going to be position. And then we'll do one more. Get string field. My Unreal UI is bugged again, so if I'm looking around crazily while typing in, forgive me. And this one is going to be called statistic value, I think it was. Is that what it was called? Stat value. Damn, they abbreviated it. How dare. Okay, stat value. So now what we want to do is to print this. So we're just going to print on the screen. And we're going to get a concatenation thing to, or append, I think it's called, to make this a little bit tidier. Okay, so let's add these. So we're just going to make, I mean, before we do any one of them, we could print out like a top of the table thing. But we'll do that in just a moment. Actually, no, it might be fine to do it now. Bear with me. So before we go and do that, we're going to go ahead and print out the headers. It's going to be upside down because we're printing in order. I think it'll be upside down because new entries push the old ones down, but it's okay just for example's sake. Okay, so first off, we're going to have, I think we'll go for position first. Then we will have like a little divider. Then we will have name or user. Yeah, maybe username will be fine for now. Get ourselves a divider again. And then finally we want to get the kills. This was, right? And then we don't need these, so we can remove these pins. I can't see remove pin, is that? Yeah. So when I'm clicking on my screen, it doesn't show up, so bear with me. Okay, so we have those. And then that means that we can copy that to help us order this. So first off, we want to take in our position. Then we want to take our display name. Then we want to take in our kills. Perfect. Okay. So that is the plan. At the end of that, then we can do one more print, which just says like end of scoreboard. Okay. So we got a bit of a spaghetti mess, but hey, that's blueprints, eh? Let's see if we can fire this then. So get leaderboard, we'll bind it in our player character like we've done at other places. So we've done K and L, let's make this J. So when input of J gets pressed, we want to, or released, we're going to go ahead and cast this to BP Playfab game instance. And then from that, we're going to go ahead and call our get leaderboard function. Oh no, we're doing the Playfab one. Yeah, as I said, my user interface isn't showing, so it's a bit hard for me. Playfab game instance, that's the one, right? Yeah, that's the one. Okay, we're going to see if it works. We need to pass in this as the reference. Apologies. That's why the autocomplete was not giving me the right thing as well. Right. Okay. I'm interested to see if this works. Who wants to see the most exciting tiny leaderboard in the top left of my screen? Oh, I'm excited. Let's log in. And now we just got to press J. Okay. We got nothing. It said the first bit, but it didn't go ahead and pull out the rest of it. But we didn't get an error either. Okay, so we're getting the data correctly. Let's see. The response here. We have a thing called leaderboard. See, I think we need to access the thing called leaderboard first. I don't know if you can see the size of the text here. It's a bit small, sorry. Let me get this in a text file to make it a little bit larger. Whack this over here, good old notepad. Okay. Oh, no, that I copied in a... That didn't copy what I meant to copy. I was copying like a blueprint. Copy that, and then let's chuck this into here. Okay, so this is what we're seeing. So the Playfab response is... We can press enter on each of the brackets. There's one of those. Then the data itself is kind of... so we need to go into data, do we? No, oh, it's confusing. Because I would have expected that we're getting it as an array. So maybe it's worth us trying to debug that and see what we're actually looking at. So let's go to our game instance. Oh, do you know what? I didn't connect it. It makes me sad sometimes. Okay, let's press it. Are we ready for the... Just rewind 2 minutes. Are we ready for a super exciting leaderboard at the top of the screen? In small, tiny text. I'm excited. Let's go. Let's press J. There it is! Ah! It happened so quick. We got to screenshot it. And then we're going to make this giant so we can appreciate it in all of its glory. Look at our leaderboard. It's a thing of absolute glory. There we go. Position 0 and 1. So you might want to go ahead and, you know, +1 to them so that the people are used to it starting on 1 in normal life. It's only coding where we start on 0, right? We have our username then. Steve and Dan. You know, the fact that my leaderboard's upside down is great because it makes Dan look like he's top. And then we have the amount of kills. Steve roaring ahead with 80. But we were able to do it, right? And that's the important thing. That was our objective for today. So what we're going to do, we're going to just do a bit of a summary of all the things that we've kind of gone over today and try and kind of consolidate. I've learned a few things during the stream as well. So if we can try and consolidate, it'd be a good kind of summary point to kind of leave off on for today. So first off, where did we start? We started through talking about the fact that we can have data existing on Playfab that we can both read and write from and to. So this is something that can be set per game. So let's get some of Playfab UI up so you can relate to what I'm saying. So if I go into content, you can set data per game. So if you remember what we did earlier, we set up a value called enemies per wave. And I could set in a value here of 3. That's great. And what we made it do in our game was when we play the game, it will load the value and spawn that many enemies for us. To prove that, if we go and change this value to 5 and I save it, and now we try that process again. This time we have 5 enemies spawning and it's reading that live from our Playfab title. Now the way that we implemented that was we have a function up here called get number of enemies from Playfab. Now because this is just read-only data from the title, it's fine that we're calling this from the client. We call something called get title data. We pass to it a key. The key needs to match enemy per wave, so I've written in there. That needs to match the name of the title data variable here. And then we get the results back. We break down the results and it comes as a JSON object. So then we just get the string field and the number fields out of this, and we can use it in whichever way we want. So we didn't actually end up using the string field, apologies. We ended up using the number field because we just need to know how many enemies to spawn, right? Then we set a value on our player, on our Playfab game instance, and then our enemy spawner was able to access that in order to spawn the enemies. So that was one thing we did, which was reading data from our game title instance. The next thing we did, we started talking about the player specific data you can get. And we have two things which are basically the same. We have player data and we have player statistics. And if we go into a player, we can see, let's look up our dear friend Steve. So per player, you have yourself information. You can click on any of these tabs to find out more, but what we're interested in here is the one called statistics, and there's one called player data for the title as well. So you can add in information into these. You can write to it from the client. It's a bit risky doing that if it's something that can impact gameplay. You might want a server authority, run that on the server to make sure that it's not having kind of hacked data put into it. So you can set data, but you can also read information from it as well. You would want to make sure that the statistic exists though before you try reading that information. With these, like I added a statistic against Steve. We have logged in count and most kills in a game, but you'll notice if I went to Dan as a player instead, oh come on, where's Dan? Oh, there he was, and then I refreshed it. Okay, we got Dan, and then if we go to my statistics, you can see I don't have that number of times logged in. So these statistics are things that are added to your account when you set that data, and the same with the player data as well. It's when you set it. So you want to make sure that the player has it before you just assume that you can read that data. Okay, so they were two things that we talked about. And if we go into our code now, so we went and looked at sending a statistic to Playfab. In order to do this, we had to go into Playfab and tell it, hey, we're okay with the client updating some statistics. So we went into our title settings and we ticked on, within the API features, we went in and we ticked this allow client to post player statistics. That allows us to change these statistics. If you didn't tick that, when we made that request, it would have said no. We would have got a failure request back and it would have said you lacked authority or something along those lines. Okay, so back to the code. So in here, what we do is we go ahead and we create a JSON structure here. We construct a JSON object, we store it as a member, and then we went and we set a field entry in here. So this is the statistic name that you want to update, and then we gave it the name of the statistic, which was most kills in a game. And then we need to add another key pair value into our JSON, and this one has the key of value, and the data we're giving it is the number of kills that we got fed into this function. Once you've created your JSON, you're then able to feed it into the update player statistics client call that we've got here. So the request, we broke that out and it requests a array of statistics, and that statistic that we made here, we whacked into an array so that it could feed into the request, and then we could send that off with our request. When it came back successful, we just shared a message in the chat in the game saying your stats were sent. You might want to put that on a UI if it was something they knew they were submitting, but normally the player wouldn't need to know about the stats being fired. And then we would check that that had been done by checking our UI in here. If we went into our player statistics, we could watch it changing. Or if it was one that was on a leaderboard, we would be able to observe the leaderboard updating. So most kills in a game, we could watch this bit change. then the final thing we did was we looked at getting the leaderboard. And the leaderboard, we just make a client-side request to something called get leaderboard. You pass into it the following information: where you want to start in that leaderboard, at what position, what statistic name that you're grabbing the leaderboard for, because there's a leaderboard per player statistic. And that's pretty much all we needed to feed into it. You can tell it how many rows of information you want as well. When that comes back successfully, you can then break down the leaderboard, which is a list of JSON kind of key pair values again. So we read from it. For each JSON object, we're getting a field out of it that's called display name, a field out of it called position, and a field out of it called stat value. To know what they are called, you can check the API. So this was a great resource that was given earlier in chat. I'll drop it again. So in here is where you could go and look up the functions you're calling. So we looked up get leaderboard. From here, you can see that it says the response comes back in a get leaderboard result kind of structure or type. So we click on that. That tells us it's made out of a leaderboard, a next reset, and a version. So we would then want to access the leaderboard, and we found out that the Unreal SDK for Playfab here automatically just gives us that leaderboard array, which was handy because you can get the version out of there like that. Can you see next reset and version? So we could just directly access that leaderboard part of that struct. And then if you click on each one of these, it's an array. We know that by the double brackets afterwards. For each one of these, we can see that it's made up of these 5 different key pair values: display name, Playfab ID, position, profile, and stat value. And profile again has more information, but we didn't need that. So that might have their avatar, for example. So if you want to show their picture next to their name in the high score table, for example. Okay, so that allowed us to get the information and parse it so that we could paste it. We're just writing it to screen as a quick example, but you can see how that was being written to screen there. So let's showcase the last 2 bits that we've talked about. First, let's set a new kill record for Dearest Dan. So we just made some little cheat functions in here to test things out. So when I press L, it will set my high score. So we need to make sure we beat Steve. We're going to set a score of 99. Going to press save. So let's just log in. So I'm going to go ahead and press L. The stats were sent. And then I'm going to go ahead and press J to show my leaderboard. And would you look at that? Dan is now, let's press J again. I want to live in the moment. Dan has now got himself a wonderful new high score where he is the best at his own game against a made up person called Steve. I think I deserve a medal for that. Look at me. I'm number 0. Okay, so that is the kind of simple loop that we've looked at. It's done in a very primitive way today in my game. I haven't made a level where it's spawning enemies you fight and it tracks the kills, and then at the end of the game it will take that number and send it to Playfab. That's what you should do, but we were just looking at the key components of this today. So yeah, we've got all the key elements of it. You could flesh it out to match your own game. The one thing that I want to repeat again though is you are able to do a bunch of cool Playfab side, like on the server side functionality. And that used to be done through cloud scripting directly within the browser. So I showed this earlier. Let me just quickly show it again if anyone missed it. So if I go into my older game, up until last month, you used to be able to go into automation and you had this area where you could write functions to basically do a bunch of functionality with your users, etc., right? But this would be server side. So you would make a client side request from your code and say, hey, can you call a function of the name hello world? And you could pass it some arguments. You could define what arguments it would take as well. And then when the server receives it, it will go and execute that. So that was the old way to do it, but that is no longer, that was legacy, and it's now been removed. So if you want to be doing stuff like that, you'd need to have a look at doing Azure functions. That is the new way to do it. So cloud scripting is still available, but it's implemented via Azure functions. And it's a whole little topic to use. It's a really well done means to have these kind of cloud-based logic functions that you can just have kind of live on a server at a certain address. And that's going to be your kind of route in order to get that function and execute it. So yeah, Azure functions are part of the Microsoft suite. Playfab is part of Microsoft. So they're just kind of combining to an existing bit of functionality for this kind of cloud function logic, and they're just bringing that into Playfab from what I understand. So yeah, that is going to really open up what you can do. But unfortunately, I didn't have time to look into that because I only realized they changed it around 2 hours before I started stream today, and I tried frantically looking into the Azure functions, but I wasn't able to make enough progress to feel confident to try and do it on stream today. But yeah, it still will be available, but it's in a different means. But yeah, okay, so hopefully today we've had a nice little insight into how we can store data, retrieve data, and use it in things like leaderboards. And I think really, if you were doing a game jam, some like bonus kind of stretch goals for you now would be the following. I would look into how you can get a Playfab user signed in, authenticated, but without having to put in an email and password and sign up like officially, because that might be a barrier for people in a game jam if they have to sign up before they play your game or submit a high score. So that would be number one thing I would look into and see how easy is it to do that. And then the second thing I'd work on is trying to make the kind of data that you get back be presented in a nicer way, like build up a generic leaderboard that could populate using that JSON struct that you get back, so that if you want to do this in your own game in future, you don't have to build a leaderboard every time you make a game jam game. So Andre is saying you can create a Playfab account with ID only, and after you can attach an email account. Well, that might be a bit, people might be more happy to do that, Andre, mightn't they? I wonder, I guess there must be like under hood a unique identifier, because I thought the email was the unique identifier, see? But that's one thing. And we also talked yesterday, Andre, that there's a way you can do it with a device ID. So based on, it might be able to automatically detect that from whatever device you're using. I think that'd be for like mobile phones, but I'd imagine that there's probably an equivalent on the PC as well. So yeah, there are areas that would be great to look into to get some answers, because that is going to make it less barriers and more likely for something for you and players to enjoy during a game jam. But what I'd like to do in my next jam potentially is, I really like the ability to tweak data values while the game is already published. So having these difficulty kind of variables that I can manage from my Playfab kind of dashboard in order to change how the game feels, I think that is quite a fun thing that I'll try and integrate into game jam games in future. Because yeah, in a lot of game jams you can't change your entry after you submitted it, but this gives you a way to balance it just in case you accidentally made it too difficult or perhaps too easy. But yeah, it's been good. If you're interested in learning more about the Microsoft Azure kind of suite of tools, along with the Microsoft Game Stack and Playfab, there's going to be a link in chat that you can click on to find out more. But yeah, let's just read this last question in chat. You're saying, I'm sure that's how daily runs are made for some games to add more play time. So yeah, with the leaderboard stuff that we're looking at today, we looked at how often it gets reset, right? And you could definitely do that. And there's ways to do it where you can, like every day you can award a player with some like currency as well. It could be like how many attempts you get at the daily run. You give them like 1 life and they can use that. But then once it's gone, they've got to wait till the next day to get another life to try the next one. So people can't repeatedly grind it for a high score. So there's lots of interesting ways you could try and use this. But yeah. Alrighty. So yeah, I'll go and find someone for us to raid. Thank you for joining me today, people. I'm glad we got through it, because yeah, when plans changed earlier and I wasn't able to do it in the same way that I did before, because I did most of what we've done tonight I did via cloud scripting a month ago. So I'd not used a bunch of these blueprint functions. Yeah, it was nice to be able to figure it out. And I'm glad that we got through it all despite a change of plan last minute. But let's have a look who we can go and raid then.